When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
Stop. 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 Had enough? Kick out mucus and quiet the cough with Mucinex 12-Hour DM for long-lasting cough and chest congestion relief. Buy Mucinex 12-Hour DM at your local retailer. Use as directed.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
I had a distinct feeling deep down, so prominent I could almost hear it. Run.
At this moment, I just felt terrified of her. Her face was dead and her eyes were black as she stared at the burning pan.
From Killer Podcasts. True tales of horror, bizarre happenings, unexplainable events. This is Disturbed. Hello, and welcome back to the show. This week, we're bringing you 2 stories that will make you hesitate the next time you're feeling generous. So sit back, listen closely, and dive into the horror. Our first story is narrated by the talented Gregory James from r/True Scary Stories. If they say, "I'm not going to hurt you," you should probably take that as a warning.
A few years ago, my husband and I were getting gas late one night at a bit of a weird gas station. 2 roads intersected at an angle, with the gas station being on the acute angle, if you can picture that. There were no working lights at the pump we chose, and it was difficult to see from either road. We were in a soft-top Jeep Wrangler with all the rear windows taken off. My husband got out to pump while I sat in the passenger seat looking at my phone. That's when I heard it. "I'm not going to hurt you," a wavery voice said some distance behind me. I froze, suddenly terrified. I turned around to look out the empty space where our back windows used to be and saw what appeared to be a homeless man a little ways off. He had rather wild gray hair, a washed-out beanie, and an oversized jacket. His hands were in his pockets. I suddenly realized how dark it was and how hard it was for anyone to see us, and I couldn't see his hands. I had a distinct feeling deep down, so prominent I could almost hear it. Run! But we were just pumping gas. He was just a weird homeless dude. My husband and I were from Key West. We'd seen plenty of them before, and they were almost all harmless. So I slowly turned back around and went back to my phone. Yet I still heard him. The distinct sound of shuffling feet, the rustle of his jacket. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again. "I just need some help. Do you have any money? I'm not going to hurt you." At this point, I could tell he was almost at the Jeep. We'd only been there a couple of minutes, and we'd been on almost empty. There was no way the tank was full. Without warning, my husband rushed into the car and hurried to start the engine. I could tell his hands were shaking. He managed to throw the car into drive, and we peeled out of there. I looked behind us and saw the man standing there, watching us with a blank expression, next to the dangling nozzle my husband hadn't bothered to hang back up. As we turned out of the gas station, my husband said, "I just had the most horrible feeling. Something in me just told me to run." I looked at him in horror and told him I'd felt the same thing. I felt tears come to my eyes as I thanked him for listening to his instincts. We went home feeling quite shaken and kept going over the events we'd just seen and the fear we'd felt. It was a day or two later that we were watching a YouTube video by security analyst Scott Stewart on the Kenyan Mall shooting. He said that in every event like this, there are people who said, "Right before it happened, I had this terrible feeling that something bad was about to happen." He adds that some people listen to that feeling and leave the area, while others mention how they regret not listening to it. I burst into tears hearing this, knowing the feeling he had described all too well. I had had that feeling and was one of those who ignored it. I remember crying, "Thank you," at my husband for listening to his sense of danger. Now, it's fully possible this was just a harmless person asking for money in a slightly creepy way and that nothing bad would have happened. But I can't stop thinking about how the weird angles of the roads kept anyone from seeing us. I can't stop thinking about how dark it was. And I can't stop thinking about his hidden hands. I still get full-body chills when his words echo in my mind. "I'm not going to hurt you." Moral of the story is, if you ever get that distinct feeling that something bad is imminent, leave the area. It may be a false alarm, but it's better than going through the rest of your life wishing you had listened to that feeling.
You're listening to Disturbed. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. The holidays are here, and you know what that means? It's time to get your friends and family the gifts they deserve. Take the stress out of shopping with Amazon's great deals and low prices on a huge range of items from toys to tech and much more. Whoever you're gifting for, Amazon has great prices on everything you need this holiday season. Shop Black Friday week starting November 21st.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock and the new original docuseries, Making Manson. In 1969, Charles Manson and his followers committed 7 brutal murders in Los Angeles that would make him infamous. Now, with access to over 100 hours of phone recordings between an incarcerated Manson and his closest confidant, a new story will unfold with shocking revelations from the man himself. Making Manson streams November 19th, only on Peacock.
Welcome back to the podcast. Our final story is narrated by Catherine Restivo from Reddit user Dangerous Party 7554. Be careful who you let into your life, listeners, because the truly dangerous ones are impossible to see coming.
I'm a 36-year-old woman living in Sweden. I've worked in mental health care for the past 18 years, mainly with people experiencing psychotic illnesses like schizophrenia. I worked at a group home for 9 years and was very close with my coworkers there, especially 2 women named Sarah and Linda. In the last few years that I worked there, another woman started working there named Malin. The 4 of us became very close. Malin was timid and shy, but also very friendly, and we got along well. She was, however, often on long-term sick leave because of her own mental health issues. She always showed up at our after-work dinners, so we continued to stay in touch even when she wasn't well enough to work full-time. She told us that she had a history of schizophrenia herself, just like the patients we were treating, but that she was medicated and hadn't had any psychotic episodes for years. Since I have an education in psychiatry and experience treating schizophrenia patients, I have no judgment toward people suffering from the illness, and it didn't bother me to be friends with someone who had that diagnosis. I still feel the same way today. In the summer of 2023, I moved on to work at a new place, also within the mental health field, but this time forensic psychiatry, like a halfway house for mentally ill murderers and other criminals. The four of us stayed in touch and still met sometimes for dinner parties. Malin told us she'd been evicted from her apartment because of an incident where she'd accidentally entered her neighbor's apartment in the middle of the night. She told us that in the huge apartment complex, the doors all looked exactly the same and that she simply walked into the wrong door by accident, and the neighbors had created a scene and reported her to the police. While it sounded out of proportion to evict someone just from that, I thought perhaps the landlord took that action because of her medical history, and I felt bad for her. I asked if anything else happened, and she claimed that this was the full story. In Sweden, it's very difficult to get an apartment after you've been evicted. You pretty much get blacklisted. Malin asked if she could move in with me. Since she was literally on the street homeless, I said, "Of course you can." I've always gotten myself into uncomfortable situations by saying yes instead of thinking about myself. I had no idea how severe the situation would get when I said yes to Malin. I live in a pretty small apartment. It's got one bedroom that only fits a bed and a desk, a living room that fits a couch and a TV, a small kitchen, and a small bathroom. And I have 2 cats. We decided Malin would stay in the living room, and I offered to throw my couch out so she could have a bed there, but she said she was fine with sleeping on the couch since it was comfortable enough. There's a door between the living room and the bedroom, but between the living room and the hallway, there's just an open arch, so she wouldn't have total privacy. I hung up a thick velvet curtain to cover the arch, so it gave her a sense of a door and a bit of privacy. There's another door from my bedroom to my kitchen, so I have 2 doors to my bedroom. I have to have one open at night since my cats want to go in and out. I naturally kept the kitchen door open and not the living room door since that's where Malin lived. She wasn't working at this time because she was on one of her long-term sick leaves. I was working shifts, so sometimes I had to get up at 6 a.m. and sometimes I didn't get home till 11 p.m. I have really severe insomnia and need to combine zolpidem with Lergigon, and even with this, I still wake up easily. I told her I would appreciate it if she could try to stay quiet on nights when I had to get up at 6 a.m., but that it was fine if she was loud when I was off work or did evening shifts. She was a heavy smoker and a coffee drinker, so I bought her a coffee machine to make her enjoy her living situation more. Yeah, I know. I'm a weirdo who doesn't drink coffee often, so I didn't have one. The coffee machine and the sink are right outside my bedroom door, as the kitchen is very small. The first night together, I had to get up at 6 a.m. for my shift. As usual, I had a hard time falling asleep. Malin had been up several times that night to go out to smoke, and I woke up every time. At 5 a.m., she started making coffee, and since it was literally outside my bedroom door, I woke up from the sounds of it. I asked her, in the nicest way possible, why she was up that early, asking if she had any plans that day, and she just said that she couldn't sleep. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I would just appreciate it if you could wait till 6 a.m. to make coffee since I really need this last hour of sleep before work." I have epilepsy that gets really bad when I don't get enough sleep. I usually get a lot of seizures if I get less than 4 hours of sleep. I knew I would probably get seizures at work now, meaning that this day would be both stressful and potentially dangerous for me since there was a huge risk that I'd fall and hurt myself. Plus, it's not good to get cramps and seizures among mentally unstable criminal clients who you're supposed to care for. I know it's not an ideal situation to work in that field with my condition, and I ended up quitting after only 6 months. Malin said she really wanted coffee with her cigarettes, but she'd try to wait the next time I have to work. I accepted this and went on with my day, but things didn't get better. She continued to wake me up through the nights and early in the mornings and continued to promise to stop, but insisted she really wanted coffee with her cigarettes. I suggested drinking iced coffee or Coke instead, but she didn't want to. Meanwhile, she demanded that I be silent at 10 p.m. because that's when she wanted to sleep. And I respected that. She'd go through phases of binge eating when she'd empty my fridge and pantry. One time, I bought a big loaf of bread and she texted me 30 minutes after I left the apartment saying, "Hey, I'm sorry, I ate your loaf of bread. I'll pay you back once I get money." An entire loaf of bread in 30 minutes. I had told her when she moved in to fill at home, and what's mine is yours, so I couldn't really get mad, but this started to annoy me. It was getting kind of expensive because she would eat such huge amounts, and it always happened at inconvenient times of the day, like after an evening shift when the store was closed and I came home hungry and she'd emptied the kitchen of everything I'd bought earlier that day. Malin had long black hair that was everywhere, all over the sink, the floor, the bathtub. I'm no clean freak, but I think anyone could understand that this isn't the nicest thing to step in or see everywhere in your house. She also left her fingernails and toenails on the bathroom floor. I saw a silverfish on my bathroom floor. I'd never seen one before, and they eat hair, skin, and nails. So I figured this fella probably enjoyed life because of the new dirty condition of my bathroom. At first, I didn't want to say anything because I thought it would hurt her feelings. I just put a broom and dustpan in the bathroom to imply we needed to sweep the floor more often. This didn't work. So eventually, I told her in the nicest way possible, with a smile on my face, "Do you think we could try to clean the floor in the bathroom more often? We tend to lose some hair when we brush it, and I'm afraid we may get pests. I saw a silverfish the other day, and I don't want it to get worse." I always made sure to say we instead of you, so she wouldn't feel attacked. She promised to think about it, but nothing changed. I started dating a guy and was head over heels for him. He was also in a roommate situation, so we had a tough time getting any alone time. I asked Malin if there was any chance that we could get a night to ourselves every now and then in the apartment, and promised that she would get the apartment to herself some nights as well. She didn't like the idea and claimed she had nowhere to go, no friends or family. I wasn't asking her to leave for 24 hours, just for a few hours so we could get some quality time together. She could just go to the library or take a walk. I was working for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, so she got a lot of time to herself. One of our old coworkers realized that never getting any time to myself was making me feel really suffocated. She offered to let Malin stay the night at her place. After all, they were friends too. Malin said she didn't want to bother her, but we told her that she wouldn't. She was more than welcome. I really just wanted one night for myself and my guy. I didn't understand why she made such a big deal over leaving me in the apartment for just one night. She eventually accepted and spent the night at our friend's home, and I spent the night away the next week so she could get more alone time too. When I came home the next morning from my night away, I saw that my cat's water bowl was completely dried out. I filled it to the brim the night before. I asked her how this was possible, and she said the cats must have tipped it over, but there was no spill on the floor. My cats are very social and usually cuddle up with strangers after just a few minutes. I noticed that the cats withdrew from her more and more over time, and in the last couple of weeks, they never left my bedroom except to eat or use the litter box. It seemed like they were scared of her, which I couldn't understand because she was so timid. I had this old saucepan from the 60s that meant a lot to me. You may wonder how a saucepan can mean a lot to someone, but it was my grandmother's, and it's the only thing I had that belonged to her. My mother used to cook for me with it when I was little, so it had great nostalgic value to me. Malin burned it one day and made no attempt to clean it, just left it on the stove and went out to smoke. I found it ruined and cried. She didn't even say I'm sorry. She also broke dishes several times and didn't bother to replace them or apologize. This added to my frustration with her naturally. It had been probably 2 months now, and she kept waking me up at night, kept binge eating my food, never cleaned, never left the house, scared my cats, and ruined my things. Then I realized that she stole my prescribed sleeping pills. Lots of them. I only get one per night, and as I mentioned before, I really need them. I had 20 of them on my nightstand when I left for work, and when I came home, they were gone. She denied taking them, which is pretty hilarious since she was the only one there. My frustration was steadily increasing. The summer heat was strong. I felt locked up in my tiny bedroom with my 2 cats. I never got any time to myself. I rarely had any alone time with the guy I was dating. My apartment was messy and she was stealing from me. One day out of nowhere, my old elementary school classmate messaged me on Facebook asking me how I knew Malin. He had seen my post on Facebook that we were roommates now. I told him we were old co-workers and she needed a place to stay because she had gotten evicted. He said, "I know. Do you know why she was evicted?" I said, "Yeah, she accidentally went into her neighbor's apartment." He said, "That's not the full story. She broke in and snuck up to their sleeping baby with a knife in her hand. Luckily, the father woke up and wrestled her down and managed to save the baby." I felt sick to my stomach. Could this be true? It would certainly explain her eviction, but it sounded so horrible, and she was such a nice, timid girl. But my friend had a full police report. His ex-girlfriend and her family were the ones living in the apartment that Malin had broken into. It seemed to me that Malin was psychotic during the break-in. It was clear to me that she'd been lying about what had happened and about how long she'd been mentally stable. Beyond the frustration I felt, I now started feeling quite paranoid. I needed her to move out. Only problem was, we had a contract saying she would have 30 days notice. I knew if I asked her in a harsh way, it would mean 30 days of chaos until she moved out, so I wanted to handle this as nicely as I could. I started looking for cheap hostels that I could suggest to her so she wouldn't be on the streets. I sat down with her and told her that I loved living with her and felt really horrible about this, but I just missed my alone time and this apartment was too small for 2 people. I said it wasn't personal and that I didn't want to live with anyone right now, that I wished it could have worked out and that I was really sorry and I hoped we would remain friends. She looked crushed. I showed her the hostel I found and said I understood it wasn't the ideal situation, but I really needed her to move out because I felt suffocated and it was tough for me not to get my sleep. She said, okay, she would try to move out, but not until 30 days had passed. And I said, of course. The first night after our talk, she got up and made her coffee at 2:30 a.m. I nearly had a meltdown. I had to get up at 6 and couldn't go back to sleep. I asked her in the morning, probably for the 10th time, to not make coffee till I got up, but she didn't even answer me. She just sat on the sofa and stared out the window. I said her name, but she kept staring. I was freaked out as I left for work. She kept being weird, making messes, waking me up and eating my food, and all I could think about was the incident with her and the baby and the knife. I eventually got so pissed off about being woken up by the coffee maker that I unplugged it and stored it in my attic where she couldn't access it. It may have been childish, but I was just so tired. My sleeping pills were stolen, and I was starting to feel like Edward Norton at the beginning of Fight Club. Well, the next night I was woken up at 4 a.m. by her making coffee in a saucepan. I tried to talk to her again, but she just stared and didn't reply. Being frustrated and at a tipping point, I took the saucepan and stored it in the attic. I was going crazy and just wanted her to stop these nightly coffee routines. The third night, the guy I was dating was sleeping at my place because I was getting really paranoid over her weird behavior. Her not speaking to me and just staring into space was really unsettling. I woke up from my very light snooze to him poking me. He whispered, "Look." In the open doorway, Malin was just standing silently, staring at us. Her long black hair over her face, just like a horror movie. It reminded me of the ending of Paranormal Activity when Katie just stares at Micah in the final scene. I sat up and said, "What are you doing?" But before I could even finish my sentence, she slammed the door shut. I heard the sound of metal falling to the floor as she ran to the living room. I yelled out, "You need to leave!" and started crying hysterically because this was turning into a fucking nightmare. Of course I couldn't go back to sleep, and I was really happy that I had company that night. I just kept asking myself, had she done this before? Stared at me in my sleep? The next day, when I got out of bed, I opened my bedroom door and saw a kitchen knife on the floor. So that was the metal sound I heard last night. I took all my knives and locked them in the attic. I then asked a friend of mine to come to my house and be with me when I told Malin that she had to move out immediately. I couldn't wait another 27 days. During the conversation, I really tried to stay calm. I knew she had a mental illness. Even though I was extremely frustrated, I couldn't hate her. I was mostly scared and tired. As I spoke to her, however, she didn't answer, just kept staring out the window. She left the apartment and sent a text saying that I was disrespectful for bringing a friend over to her place. Nighttime came, and I thought this would finally be a quiet night. No coffee maker or saucepans. But at 3 a.m., I woke up to her burning dry coffee grounds in a frying pan. At this moment, I just felt terrified of her. Her face was dead and her eyes were black as she stared at the burning pan. I put out the fire and she ran off to the living room in silence. I suspected she'd gone into psychosis. I knew she had an appointment with her psychiatrist the next day, and while she was away, I packed all her things. I then sent her a text telling her she needed to pick them up and give me my keys back, and that I'd give her money for a hostel for the next 26 days. She didn't reply. The guy I was seeing came to keep me company in case she tried to fight about it. She didn't. She put down the keys without looking at us and left. Our friends, Linda and Sarah, both told me that she moved in with a guy she was dating and stayed there for a few weeks till amazingly she somehow got an apartment of her own. She started working again, and I was really happy to hear this. She seemed to be doing well. Then, in January of this year, Sarah told me that Malin had called her and told her that everything must burn, that she had a baby that she must save, and other delusional things. She called 112, the Swedish emergency number, but they hadn't taken it seriously. Malin then proceeded to burn her entire apartment down because the voices in her head told her she must burn everything to save her friends and family. Her neighbors tried to rescue her from the fire, but she fought them off and ran back in to pour liquor on the fire. She made it out alive, but was arrested and sentenced for aggravated arson. She will serve her time in a mental institution, prison, for a long time. Possibly forever. What's ironic is that she'll probably be in the same facility where she used to work. Sarah was a witness at the trial and relayed to me that Malin had stopped taking her medication, Abilify, because she thought it made her feel numb, and she thought she was stable enough to function without it. Apparently not. I also learned that she had stopped taking her medication the last few weeks that she stayed at my house. When she stared blankly into space, when she stared at me with the knife in her hand, and when she burned the frying pan that last night, she was going into psychosis. It's disturbing to think about what would have happened to me and my cats if I had let her stay longer, or if I was a heavy sleeper. I also wonder what would have happened to that baby if the father hadn't woken up in the nick of time. Yeah, I know it seems crazy that I didn't just throw her out right away, but it was complicated. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to talk about this with my friends because they still sympathize with Malin and have minimized my experience. They think I'm making a bigger deal out of this than it was.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at disturbedpodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producer is Elizabeth Flood. Our sound designer and audio engineer is Nathan Corson. Executive producers Bridget Coyne and Noah Founts. Until next time, stay safe out there.
An airliner heads for Alaska with 101 passengers and crew. Then, somewhere over the Gulf of Alaska, Flight 293 slams into the icy waters below.
Even if all 4 engines quit, it just doesn't fall out of the sky.
No bodies were recovered. Loved ones had no closure and were left to wonder.
What happened to Flight 293?
Unsolved Histories, What Happened to Flight 293 is available now, wherever you get your podcasts.